Father's Day smelled like garlic, butter, and something I couldn't name, maybe pride cooked down to a bitter glaze. The trattoria was packed, waiters weaving through tight aisles with steaming bowls of pasta. Families clustered around white tablecloths, clinking glasses, telling stories I wished were mine. I was at the far end of our table. My table, technically, since I'd paid for the reservation and most of the meal. A little card at the center read, Festa del Papa, Celebration of Fathers. I had imagined this day differently, a quiet toast, maybe a card with a messy signature from my grandson Jake, a look from my daughter that said, Dad, I see you. Instead, I watched her swivel toward her father-in-law like a flower tracking sunlight. Leonard, Kara sang, gently laying a glossy gift box before him, ribbon-like liquid gold, paper thick enough to be its own promise. You do so much for our family. Our family, not my family. Ours, as if I'd wandered in from the sidewalk by mistake. I told myself it didn't matter, that maybe she was just distracted, but the truth gnawed at me in quiet moments. I had built her world brick by brick, yet she treated me like scaffolding, useful until the structure was complete, then forgotten. I tried to ignore it, tried to hold on to the little memories that still mattered, the nights she fell asleep on my shoulder after a long study session, the mornings we fixed her old beat-up car together in the driveway. But each new slight chipped away at those memories. It was like patching a leaking pipe that kept springing holes faster than I could seal them. I told myself, family comes first, always. That was my creed, my flaw, and my curse. But one night, while lying awake in my apartment, the sounds of the street below drifting through my thin windows, something unsettled me. A conversation from months earlier replayed in my head. Kara's voice, soft but sharp, telling a friend, Eric's dad is who I wish I'd had growing up. That though at the time, I'd brushed it off as a slip, but lying there in the dark, I couldn't shake it. A cold wave of understanding washed over me as I realized Kara hadn't just been neglecting me, she'd been replacing me. And the worst part, she thought I hadn't noticed. The pattern wasn't sudden. That's the part that cuts deepest. It was a slow fade, like the way paint peels off an old fence. At first you think it's just weather. Then one day you realize there's nothing left holding the wood together. Christmas was the first time I really noticed. It was my house, but I barely recognized it. Kara had insisted on hosting at my place that year, promising she'd make it special for both dads. I thought she meant me. Turns out, she meant Leonard, Eric's father. I walked into the dining room carrying the ham I'd baked myself, hands still red from the oven's heat. The table was dressed in linens I didn't own, silverware I'd never bought. At the head of the table sat Leonard, wine glass raised like a king in a castle. Kara had placed him there. He should have the best seat, she said, shooing me to the side like I was an extra at my own gathering. I ended up wedged near the kitchen door, where I could feel the draft every time it swung open. Easter came next, a brunch at their country club, a place I never fit in. I'd saved up to buy a decent jacket, still smelling faintly of mothballs from the thrift shop, but it wasn't enough. Kara introduced me to her circle of friends with a dismissive shrug. That's just my dad, but this... She pulled Leonard forward with both hands. This man is like a second father to me. The words sliced clean through me. My mouth opened, but nothing came. How could I argue my way back into my own role? You don't compete with a title like second father. You just shrink into silence. And then came my birthday. I'd been quietly looking forward to it, not for gifts, but for acknowledgement. Maybe dinner with Jake. Maybe a cake with my name spelled wrong on purpose. Instead, Kara forgot completely. My phone stayed silent the entire day. No card, no text, not even a missed call. 2 days later, my sister sent me pictures. Balloons, streamers, a 5-tier cake. A surprise birthday party for Leonard, organized by Kara. She was in the photos too, holding the knife with him, her hand over his like a daughter feeding pride into the wrong father. I stared at those photos until my eyes blurred. My chest tightened with a pressure I couldn't name. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was erasure. Piece by piece, moment by moment, I was being written out of her story. That night, I sat in my apartment, flipping through an old photo album. There was Kara at 7, holding up a melting ice cream cone I'd bought her with 2 crumpled dollar bills. There she was at 12, smiling wide with her braces. the braces I'd worked overtime to pay for. At 17, in her prom dress, clutching my arm before she stepped into the rented limo, every page whispered the same truth. I had built the foundation, but someone else was living in the house. I tried to tell myself it was just phases, just mistakes. Children get caught up in the shine of money, in the easy compliments of wealth. Maybe she'd grow out of it. Maybe she'd remember who stayed up with her when she had the flu, who fixed her car at midnight so she wouldn't miss her SATs. But then I remembered something I couldn't unhear. At Leonard's birthday party, she had leaned over during a toast and whispered, just loud enough for the microphone to catch. He's the father figure who really deserves to be celebrated. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't about phases or mistakes. It was a choice. My daughter had chosen who she wanted to honor, and it wasn't me. My heart started racing when I realized this wasn't neglect. It was replacement. And if I didn't stop it, one day I'd vanish completely. A ghost at the edges of my own bloodline. Father's Day. You'd think after 63 years I'd have learned not to expect much from people. But some part of me, the foolish, hopeful part that still remembered bedtime stories and piggyback rides, clung to the idea that maybe this year would be different, that maybe my daughter would look at me and see more than the tired old man in oil-stained coveralls. The restaurant she chose was all marble floors and chandeliers, too polished for me, though I'd paid the deposit. Families sat in booths around us, fathers wearing paper crowns or holding handmade cards. I saw one little girl climb onto her dad's lap, arms around his neck, whispering something that made his whole face light up. My throat tightened. Our table was long, crowded with Kara's friends, Eric, his parents, and my grandson Jake. I sat 2 seats from the end, not by choice, but by arrangement. The head of the table, again, belonged to Leonard. Always Leonard. His cufflinks flashed in the light as he lifted his wine, already basking in attention like a man who thought he owned the day. Kara stood suddenly, the clink of her glass pulling the room quiet. She beamed at Leonard with the kind of pride I used to dream she'd aim at me. This year, she announced, we wanted to do something special for the man who's always there for us, who supports us, who deserves the world. She set a polished box in front of him, wrapped with ribbon so thick it looked like velvet. He peeled it open, and the table gasped. Inside lay 2 cruise tickets, 14 days, Mediterranean, balcony suite, a $13,000 vacation. Leonard chuckled, pleased. You shouldn't have, he said, but his eyes told a different story. Of course you should have. Kara laughed, sliding into the seat beside him like a child who had just pleased her teacher. You've earned it, Leonard. You've always been so generous with us. I felt the words land like stones in my chest. Generous? With us? Every rent check, every late-night bill payment, every dollar scraped together for her dreams had come from me, not him. And then she turned to me. Oh, Dad, we didn't forget you. She reached into her purse and flicked something across the table, a rectangle of cheap paper, skidding until it landed in front of my water glass. A scratch-off ticket. $2. There you go, she said with a smirk that told me she thought she was being clever. Maybe you'll finally contribute something meaningful to the family, and don't forget, I get half if you win. The table erupted in laughter. Even Eric chuckled, low and satisfied. Leonard fanned his cruise tickets like a deck of cards, basking in the glow of the joke. I sat frozen. The scratch-off lay limp under my palm, its edge already curling from the condensation of my glass. Jake, my grandson, glanced between us, confusion on his young face. He shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I forced my lips into something like a smile. Thank you, I managed, though the words burned my throat raw. Inside, my chest was collapsing. That little ticket wasn't just a gag gift. It was a verdict. A public declaration that my worth, after a lifetime of sacrifice, could be summed up in 2 cheap dollars and a cruel laugh. The waiter arrived with entrees, setting plates in front of everyone. My pasta steamed, but I couldn't taste a thing. The conversation moved on as though nothing had happened. Kara leaned into Leonard, laughing at his stories. Eric draped his arm across the back of her chair like a man displaying a prize he hadn't earned. I sat there, staring at that ticket, my fork untouched, the noise of the restaurant ringing in my ears like static. When the plates were cleared and goodbyes exchanged, Kara kissed Leonard on the cheek, thanking him again for being the best dad. For me, she offered nothing but a pat on the shoulder, her eyes already elsewhere. I walked out into the night, the cool air slicing through my shirt. The ticket was still in my hand, damp from my sweat. I nearly crumpled it and tossed it in the gutter. But something sharp and stubborn made me slide it into my pocket instead. It was just $2, just cardboard and ink. But as I climbed into my car and sat in silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't finished with me yet. A cold wave of understanding washed over me as I realized this wasn't just a joke. It was Kara's way of telling me, in front of everyone, that I didn't matter anymore. But she was wrong. Dead wrong. Back in my apartment, the silence was thick. Too thick. No clinking glasses, no polite laughter, no Leonard holding court. He peeled the ribbon with the patience of a man who's unwrapped too many expensive things to care how long it takes. Inside lay 2 tickets, thick, embossed stock with a gold crest. Even across the table I could read the first word, cruise. Kara leaned closer, voice bright. Mediterranean, 14 days, balcony suite. I used Dad's card to book it. He insisted. The laugh that rolled around the table arrived before the meaning did. It swelled, warm and approving, touching everyone but me. Leonard, impeccable shirt, cufflinks like tiny planets, laughed last, a deep, satisfied sound. You have a generous father, Kara. My fork touched down on china with a whisper. I swallowed to keep my voice steady. Generosity isn't about price tags, I said, but it slipped into the commotion like a coin into a fountain. Heard, maybe. Answered, never. Dad! Kara turned to me at last, pulling something from her purse. No ribbon, no card. Just a flimsy rectangle with a smear of convenience store ink. Just the buzz of my old refrigerator and the hum of the streetlights outside my window. I emptied my pockets onto the kitchen table. Keys, wallet, and that stupid $2 lottery ticket. It looked even cheaper under the harsh yellow bulb overhead. The edges were bent from my fingers, and there was a greasy thumbprint smudged across the front. I stared at it. Should I even bother? I almost laughed. What were the odds? 2 million to 1? 5 million? The universe didn't care about men like me. Men who worked until their hands cracked. Men who sat alone on Father's Day. But then I thought about Kara's smirk, the laughter around that table, the way she slid that ticket like it was a punchline to a joke I didn't understand. And something inside me whispered, scratch it. I grabbed a quarter from the drawer and sat down. My heart was thudding harder than it had any right to. It was just a game. Just cardboard. The first number matched. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. No, I wasn't seeing things. The first number matched. I kept going. Second number, match. I let out a shaky laugh, the kind that sounds more like disbelief than joy. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered. I scratched the third. Another match. By the fourth, my hand was trembling. By the fifth, I couldn't breathe. And then the sixth, oh God, the sixth. All 6 numbers. The air in the room shifted. My apartment, with its peeling paint and rattling pipes, suddenly felt too small to hold the weight of what was happening. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. I paced the room, ticket clutched tight, my pulse pounding in my ears. Is this real? I whispered to nobody. My voice cracked. This can't be real. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. I checked the state lottery website, entered the numbers, double-checked, triple-checked. $120 million. I sank into the couch, the springs groaning under me, my vision blurred, tears threatening. For years, I had given until I was empty, scraping by, convincing myself that sacrifice was its own reward. But now the universe had handed me a card so wild it almost felt cruel. I pressed the ticket flat against my chest, feeling the paper crinkle with my heartbeat. For the first time in years, I laughed. A real laugh, loud, shaky, half crazy. It startled even me. But beneath the laughter, something darker stirred, a thought I hadn't allowed myself to voice before. Maybe Kara would finally care now. But not because she loved me, because she loved the money. I pictured her face when she realized, that smirk fading, replaced by hunger. I pictured Leonard, calculating, already scheming how to funnel it back into his empire of cufflinks and cruises. And then I pictured Jake, my grandson, the only one at that table who had looked at me with confusion instead of cruelty. The laughter stopped. My jaw clenched. I knew this money wasn't just a blessing, it was a weapon. And I'd have to choose how to use it. For years, I'd let them treat me like an afterthought. But now I had the kind of power people kill for. And if I used it right, I could make sure Kara never forgot the difference between a father and a placeholder. I leaned back into the couch, the ticket still in my hand, my breath finally slowing. Outside, a car horn blared, and the city kept moving, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the numbers replaying in my mind like a drumbeat. 120 million. 120 million. 120 million. I had been humiliated, erased, replaced. But now I had the chance to rewrite everything. My heart pounded as I realized this wasn't just a win, it was a reckoning. And with every beat, one truth became clearer. The same daughter who gave me this ticket as a joke was about to choke on the punchline. I told myself I'd wait before saying anything, cash the ticket, meet with a lawyer, make a plan. But patience has never been my strong suit. The morning after I won, I couldn't resist. Over coffee that tasted sharper than usual, I called Kara. I didn't say I'd won. I only asked a question, casual as I could make it. Hey honey, just wondering, hypothetically, if someone were to win the lottery, what do you think they should do first? Her pause was brief but heavy, like gears clicking into place. Then she laughed, too high, too bright. Well, first they'd call their daughter, of course, and then they'd make sure she gets her fair share. Remember, Dad, half. Half. The word clanged in my ear. Not congratulations, not, that's amazing. Not even a chuckle about my luck. Just half. By noon, she was at my apartment. No knock, no hesitation. Just the sound of my old door creaking open and her heels tapping across the floor like she already owned the place. Dad, she sang, wrapping me in a hug so tight it nearly knocked the breath out of me. You look great. Have you been eating better? I stiffened under her grip. She hadn't hugged me like that in years, maybe decades. Kara, I said carefully, what brings you here? She pulled a stack of papers from her purse, crisp and already tabbed with colored markers. I figured we'd get ahead of things. Here's a draft of the agreement. Nothing complicated, just a simple 50-50 split. That way we can avoid any unpleasant misunderstandings. I blinked. Agreement? What agreement? She smiled the way a lawyer does when they think they've already won the case. Don't play coy, Dad. You scratched that ticket, didn't you? I can tell. You won. I swallowed hard. My silence betrayed me. She slid the papers across the table. Legalese filled the page with my name already typed in. It wasn't just a draft. It was a contract. She had been prepared. I stared at her. You had this ready? Her smirk widened. Well, you never know. Better safe than sorry, right? Besides, you know I've always been good with money. Let me handle the investments, the trusts, the properties. You wouldn't even have to think about it. Just sign here, and we'll take care of everything. We? That word again. We. But there was no we in her voice. There was possession. Hunger. Kara, I said slowly, fighting to keep the tremor out of my voice. Do you even hear yourself? This isn't a partnership. This isn't generosity. You're demanding. Her eyes narrowed, the charm slipping. Don't make this harder than it has to be. You owe me, Dad. Everything you've ever done was for me, right? Well, now it's time to put your money where your mouth is. The words hit like a slap. I had spent my life breaking myself in half to build hers. And she stood there, telling me I owed her. I looked at her hands, perfect nails, polished pink. Not a callus, not a scar, not like mine. Her world had been bought with the cracks in my skin. And now she wanted the rest. I pushed the papers back across the table. No. Her smile froze. Excuse me? I said no. My voice was low, steady, stronger than I felt inside. She leaned forward, eyes hard. You're making a mistake. If you think you can keep this from me, you're wrong. People will know. I'll make sure of it. There it was, the mask stripped away. Not a daughter, not even family. Just a claimant circling an inheritance that wasn't hers yet. I stood, fists clenched. Get out, Kara! She laughed, sharp and humorless. You can't push me out of this, Dad. You never could push me out of anything. Remember who writes your story now. Her heels clicked away, the door slamming behind her. My apartment trembled with the force of it. I sank into my chair, my hands shaking. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the papers she'd left behind. My daughter hadn't come to celebrate me. She hadn't even come to ask. She'd come to take, and I finally saw her for what she was. Not my little girl anymore, but someone who had learned to value wealth over blood. A cold wave of understanding washed over me as I realized Kara hadn't just prepared for my win. She had been planning for it. I wasn't her father anymore. I was her jackpot. After Kara stormed out, I sat there staring at the contract she'd left behind. My name was typed neatly at the bottom, waiting for a signature, waiting for me to hand over my soul. For years I had ignored the little red flags, the forgotten birthdays, the way she always borrowed money that never came back, the way she introduced Leonard like he was her real father. But now those warning signs weren't whispers anymore. They were sirens. I needed help. Real help. The next morning, I walked into a law office downtown. Not one of those marble lobby firms with $30 parking, but a modest place with wood-paneled walls and a receptionist who greeted me with sincerity instead of suspicion. That's where I met Marcus Webb, a lawyer in his 40s with sharp eyes and a steady handshake. He listened without interrupting as I explained everything: the Father's Day dinner, the lottery ticket, Kara's contract. When I finished, he leaned back, tapping his pen against a legal pad. "Mr. Martinez," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you need to protect yourself immediately. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything verbal or written without counsel. If what you're telling me is accurate, your daughter may already be laying legal traps to access your assets." "Traps?" I repeated, the word sour in my mouth. He nodded. "Happens more often than you think. Family members see sudden wealth, and suddenly the definition of fair share gets creative." She flicked it across the table. It skittered and stopped next to my water glass. "A $2 scratch-off." "Since you're so lucky," she teased, not bothering to make it sound kind, "maybe you'll finally contribute something meaningful to the family. And if you win, half is mine." She winked. "Finder's fee." The table laughed again. This time, I felt it in my teeth. Jake looked at me, confused, then down at his plate like the right answer might be hiding under a meatball. Eric cleared his throat and lifted a glass. "To fathers," he declared, eyes on Leonard, not on me. "To the ones who show up." I pressed the ticket flat with 2 fingers. My hands were clean. No grease, no engine dust. But they remembered. 40 years of turning bolts until they listened. 40 years of double shifts, so Kara could have textbooks and dental work. And that Florence semester she still mentioned when people needed to be impressed. I had traded my knuckles for her future. She returned my hands to me, empty. You'd be surprised how often blood ties blur when money is involved. I looked down at my calloused hands. "She's not supposed to be like this. She's my daughter." Marcus's eyes softened but didn't waver. "I know, but right now, she's also your biggest risk." That's when he introduced me to Sarah Chen, a forensic accountant, mid-30s, precise, the kind of woman who noticed details most people would overlook. She sat across from me with her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. "Give me access to your accounts, statements, any records you've kept," she said. "I'll tell you exactly what's been going on." I hesitated. Handing over my financial life to strangers felt like another betrayal waiting to happen. But then I remembered Kara's smirk, her words, "You owe me." So I gave Sarah everything. 3 days later, she called me back to the office. On her screen, spreadsheets glowed in shades of red and green. "Here's the pattern," she said, pointing with her pen. "Over the last 6 years, there have been repeated transfers, small enough to avoid notice, large enough to add up. We're talking about $87,000, siphoned gradually." I blinked. "87,000?" She nodded. "Labeled as loans, but no repayment. No intention of repayment. In fact, I found text attached to some transfers, Kara telling friends, 'My dad will never ask for it back. He never does.'" The words felt like a knife, twisting. "And there's more," Sarah continued. She pulled up screenshots of Kara's social media, Instagram posts of her smiling with Leonard, captions like, "So grateful for real father figures in my life." In another, she'd cropped me out of a family picture entirely, the empty space where I should have been glaring louder than any insult. I clenched my jaw. "She's been erasing me." Sarah looked at me, sympathy in her eyes, but professionalism in her tone. Mr. Martinez, this isn't just financial exploitation. It's reputation, identity, legacy. She's rewriting the story of your family, and you're not in it. I turned to Marcus, my throat tight. What do I do? He steepled his fingers. First, we secure your winnings. A trust, ironclad, untouchable. Second, we document everything. Every dollar she took, every post, every slight. If this goes to court, we'll need evidence. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. Resolve. I wasn't just a tired old mechanic anymore. I was a father with a weapon. $120 million backed by the truth. As I left the office that night, the city lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. I held the folder Marcus had given me close to my chest, heavier than any toolbox I'd ever carried. Kara thought she could outmaneuver me. She thought I was still the same man who sat quietly while Leonard took my chair, while she forgot my birthday, while she erased me piece by piece. But now I had allies. Now I had evidence. And soon I would have justice. My pulse quickened as I realized the betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was financial, calculated, deliberate. Which meant one thing. This wasn't neglect. It was theft. And theft has consequences. Numbers hurt. But words, pictures, they cut deeper. When Sarah slid her laptop across the table, I thought she was just showing me more account summaries. Another string of transactions proving Kara's habit of siphoning money. But the screen wasn't filled with spreadsheets. It was Instagram, my daughter's Instagram. The first photo showed Kara at a family barbecue, her arm looped through Leonard's, both of them grinning at the camera. The caption read, "Grateful for real father figures in my life." I blinked, leaning closer. Real father figures? Sarah scrolled. Another photo appeared. Christmas morning, the tree behind them piled with gifts. Leonard sat in the middle, Jake on his lap, Kara beaming beside him. My chair, my usual chair, was empty. The caption, "Couldn't ask for a better dad to spend the holidays with." The words blurred for a second. I rubbed my eyes, but the sting didn't go away. She kept scrolling. Easter brunch. Leonard carving ham, Kara kissing his cheek. Blessed with family that truly shows up. And then, my birthday. Or rather, Leonard's birthday. Balloons, a towering cake, Kara standing beside him, holding a knife together like they were father and daughter cutting a wedding cake. The caption, "Celebrating the man who deserves the world." There was no mention of me, no picture, not even a stray candle to suggest I'd ever existed. My stomach churned. She's erasing me. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. She's been curating a narrative. Public perception matters to people like her. She wants her world to see Leonard as the father who matters. I swallowed hard. And me? Sarah's eyes didn't flinch. You're the ghost she edits out. The words hit harder than any spreadsheet, harder than the $87,000 she stole, because money was numbers. But this was identity, memory, legacy. My daughter was not just taking my money, she was rewriting history to pretend I never existed. I scrolled myself now, unable to stop. Each photo felt like a blow. In one, Kara had posted, "Family isn't blood. It's who's really there for you." That one nearly doubled me over. I remembered sitting by her bed when she had pneumonia at 9 years old, cooling her forehead with a damp cloth all night long. I remembered driving 6 hours straight through a snowstorm so she could tour the college she dreamed of. I remembered pawning my wedding ring just to cover her first semester's books. But in her curated world, none of that mattered. None of it existed. My fingers trembled on the trackpad. I wanted to close the laptop, slam it shut, break it if I had to. But I kept scrolling. There was Jake, my grandson, in a post where Kara had written, "So glad he has positive male role models to look up to." And there was Leonard, holding Jake's shoulder, pointing toward the horizon like some kind of sage guiding the next generation. That's when it broke me. Not the money, not the mockery at Father's Day, but the sight of my grandson being told that his grandfather wasn't me, that I didn't count, that the man he should admire wasn't the one who'd built his mother's life from sweat and sacrifice, but the man who'd stepped in and taken the credit. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The air felt heavy, my throat tight. Finally, I whispered, "She's trying to erase me from my own bloodline." Marcus, sitting quietly in the corner until then, leaned forward. His voice was calm but carried weight. "Mr. Martinez, this is more than betrayal. This is legacy theft. If she controls the narrative, she controls how you're remembered. And if she controls the money, she cements it." The words settled over me like cement. Legacy theft. That's what this was. I stood, pacing the room, my mind burning. She thinks she can take my place in Jake's eyes. She thinks she can bury me under Leonard's shadow. She thinks I'll just let it happen. I stopped, gripping the back of the chair, knuckles white. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something stronger than grief, stronger than anger. Resolve. A cold wave of understanding washed over me as I realized Kara's betrayal wasn't about money at all. It was about identity. She didn't just want my winnings. She wanted my place. And if I didn't fight back, I'd disappear from history itself. For days after Sarah showed me those posts, I felt like I was living underwater, every photo replayed in my head, every caption a knife twisting deeper. Real father figures. Family isn't blood. Each one whispered the same poison. You don't matter. But grief can only last so long before it curdles into resolve. I wasn't going to let my daughter erase me. I wasn't going to let Leonard wear my crown. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let Jake grow up thinking his grandfather was a ghost. So I went back to Marcus and Sarah, my folder of evidence in hand. I sat down across from them, my voice steady. We build a wall around the money, around my legacy, and we make it so if Kara wants in, she has to earn it. Marcus leaned forward, tapping his pen on the table. A trust, ironclad, irrevocable. Once it's in place, she can't touch it without meeting the conditions you set. Sarah nodded. We document everything. Every transfer, every post, every instance of financial and emotional manipulation. If she challenges the trust, this becomes evidence of unfitness. Unfitness. The word burned, but in a way that lit a fire. What about Jake? I asked. My grandson's face haunted me. The confusion in his eyes at that restaurant. The way he looked between us when the table laughed at me. He's innocent in this. He deserves a future. Sarah smiled softly. Then we make him the primary heir. College fund, inheritance, protections in place, so it's untouchable by his parents. I sat back, the first spark of hope flickering in my chest. And Kara? Marcus didn't hesitate. We make her inheritance conditional, public apology, written acknowledgement of her treatment toward you, and something concrete, volunteering, community service. She has to prove she values more than money before she touches a cent. The idea settled over me like armor. It wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was justice. Thank you, I said, because that is what you say when people behave badly in public, and you were raised to keep the roof from catching fire. My voice came out even, measured. The way a man speaks when he decides not to bleed where everyone can see. That's my dad, Kara announced to the table, always gracious. They mistake my kindness for weakness, I thought. The words forming themselves like they'd been waiting in my mouth. I rubbed my thumb along the edge of the ticket. Cardboard rasped like a match about to strike. Leonard studied his cruise vouchers again. 2 weeks is hardly enough, he murmured to Eric, as if the tickets had been a minor inconvenience to obtain. Kara touched his sleeve, basking in borrowed light. We'll plan something even bigger next time, she promised, then glanced at me like I was a coworker who'd fulfilled a deadline. Right, Dad? I nodded because it was easier than explaining that the world inside me had tilted. It was education. It was a mirror held up to her face so she could finally see what she had become. I thought back to the dialogue library Marcus had shown me, a line that stuck like a nail in wood. They mistake my kindness for weakness. That's what Kara had done. That's what Leonard encouraged. But this trust would turn that weakness into strength. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man waiting for scraps. I felt like a man writing his own story. We spent hours drafting the details, the Thomas Martinez Legacy Trust, clear stipulations, Jake's education and future fully funded, scholarships for kids from broken homes, kids like Kara had once been, before I gave everything. Kara's share locked behind conditions, a public apology, a statement acknowledging her betrayal, and 200 hours of elder care volunteering. Sarah smiled when she read the final draft. This isn't just financial planning, this is poetic justice. That night, I walked home through the city streets, the trust documents clutched to my chest. For the first time in years, the neon lights didn't feel harsh. They felt like fire, like fuel. I imagined Kara's face when she heard the terms. The smugness slipping, the mask cracking, Leonard's confidence dissolving into outrage. I also imagined Jake, standing tall, knowing his grandfather had fought for him, built something lasting. That thought alone was worth every scar on my hands. I paused on the bridge overlooking the river, the water black and rippling with the city lights. For so long, I had believed my life was about survival, work, sacrifice, repeat. But now I had a purpose sharper than any wrench I'd ever held. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid. A cold wave of clarity washed over me as I realized the truth. Kara thought she'd written me out of the story, but I was about to pick up the pen and write the ending myself, and she wasn't going to like her role in it. When the trust was finalized, I knew the next move wasn't about lawyers or accountants. It was about theater. Kara had always thrived on appearances, the perfect Instagram post, the polished dinner party, the illusion of having everything under control. So, I decided to give her a stage. I called her first. "Kara," I said, keeping my voice warm, careful. "I'd like to host a dinner, just family. I have an announcement to make." The silence on the other end was brief but telling. I could almost hear her brain turning over, calculating. When she answered, her voice was syrupy sweet. "Of course, Dad. That's wonderful. What's the occasion?" I chuckled softly, letting just enough mystery hang in the air. "You'll see." By the time the night arrived, I could feel the electricity buzzing in my bones. The restaurant I reserved wasn't as flashy as the one from Father's Day, but it had an intimacy to it. Soft lighting, white linens, a quiet dignity. I arrived early, making sure everything was perfect. I wanted no distractions, no excuses, just a table, a family, and the truth. They arrived one by one. Leonard, as always, in his tailored suit, cufflinks flashing like lighthouses. He walked in as if the place belonged to him. Eric followed, smug grin in place. And then Kara, dressed to kill, hair perfect, eyes glinting with anticipation. She wasn't alone. She carried a binder, thick with brochures and glossy pamphlets. Real estate developments, investment opportunities, even vacation property listings. She spread them out on the table like a queen laying down her jewels. "Dad," she said, her tone dripping with practiced affection, "we are so excited for your announcement. I've even been looking at a few investment options for you, just to make things easier." Leonard chuckled, settling into the head of the table again, as though I'd reserved it for him. "A man of your means, Tom, shouldn't be burdened with details. We'll make sure everything is handled properly." Handled. The word made my stomach turn. Jake slid in quietly beside me, offering a small smile. He didn't bring pamphlets. He didn't bring expectations. Just his presence. And that was enough. As the waiter poured wine, I watched Kara flipping through her binder, her eyes shining with greed disguised as efficiency. She thought she was running the show. She thought she had already won. I let the conversation flow, nodding, smiling, even asking questions about the vacation homes she pointed out. A villa in Tuscany. A condo in Miami. She spoke like she already held the keys. Inside, I was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes before a storm. Finally, as plates were cleared and dessert menus offered, I raised my glass. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I know you've been curious about why I asked you here. I wanted to make this announcement in person, with everyone present." Kara leaned forward, practically vibrating with anticipation. Leonard adjusted his cufflinks, his eyes narrowing with greedy satisfaction. Even Eric smirked, clearly convinced this was the moment I'd hand them the world on a silver platter. I looked at Jake, then back at the table. My heart was steady, my voice clear. "I've been doing some thinking about family, about legacy, about what it means to leave something behind that matters." Kara's smile widened. Leonard's fingers drummed lightly on the table. "And I've come to a decision," I continued, "one that I believe honors those values." I set the envelope on the table, sliding it forward. Inside were the trust documents, every stipulation, every condition, every piece of evidence lined up like dominoes ready to fall. The air shifted. Kara's eyes flicked to the envelope like a predator spotting prey. She reached for it, but I placed my hand firmly on top. "Not yet," I said softly. Her smile faltered. First, I continued, letting my gaze sweep across them. You need to understand that tonight isn't about handouts. It's about accountability. The room went still. The waiter paused at the edge of the room, sensing the tension. Even Jake looked up, his eyes wide. I leaned back in my chair, my hand still on the envelope. Everything you're about to hear will change the way you see me, and the way you see yourselves. A cold wave of anticipation filled me as I watched their faces, smiling, expectant, certain of victory. They thought they were about to inherit a fortune. They had no idea they were about to inherit the truth. The envelope sat under my hand like a live grenade. I could feel their eyes on it, their hunger almost audible. Go on, Dad, Kara urged, her voice syrupy sweet. Tell us the good news. Leonard leaned back, smug, swirling his wine. Eric smirked, already picturing dollar signs. I took a breath, steadying myself. For weeks I'd carried this moment in my chest like a secret weapon. Now it was time to fire. Here's the truth, I began. My voice was calm, measured, the voice of a man who'd spent years swallowing disappointment, finally ready to spit it back out. I did win the lottery, $120 million. Gasps rippled around the table. Kara clapped her hands together, her eyes sparkling like a child's on Christmas morning. I knew it, she squealed. I told you, Leonard, I told you. Leonard raised his glass in mock toast. Congratulations, Tom. You couldn't have done it without Kara's gift. Their laughter cut like knives. I let it pass. I looked for some small mercy, water, bread, anything. The pitcher was empty, the basket down to crumbs. My gaze landed on the little Father's Day card, now smeared with marinara. Festa del Papa blurred, then sharpened again. I slid the lottery ticket into my shirt pocket like a man pocketing a receipt for a purchase he wasn't proud of. It crinkled, loud to my ear, quiet to everyone else. The server arrived with espresso, tiny cups, tiny spoons, tiny grace. I didn't drink mine. I watched the crema collapse and thought about the last time Kara had looked at me the way a daughter looks at a father. Little feet on top of my steel-toed boots, riding along as I walked her down the hall. The scent of motor oil and baby shampoo tangled into a memory so tender, it felt like I should apologize for holding it. We stood to leave, kisses, air, and cheek. The kind of affection people perform when they have reputations. Kara hugged Leonard longer than she hugged me, because I knew what was coming next. But there's more, I said, sliding the envelope into the center of the table. This money isn't a free-for-all. It's not a prize to be carved up. It's my legacy, and I've put protections in place to make sure it's honored. Kara's smile faltered. Protections? I nodded. It's all here. The Thomas Martinez Legacy Trust. I opened the envelope, spreading the documents like cards in a dealer's hand. The neat type glinted under the soft restaurant lights. Jake is the primary heir, I announced. His education and future are fully funded. Beyond that, scholarships will go to kids from broken homes, kids who need the kind of support I once gave without question. Kara blinked, her face paling. What about me? I looked straight at her. You're not cut out, but your share comes with conditions. You will write a public apology acknowledging your treatment of me. You will complete 200 hours of elder care volunteering. Only then will you see a dime. The table went silent. Forks paused midair. The clinking of glasses from other tables seemed suddenly far away. Kara's eyes widened, her lips trembling. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm serious. My voice was steel now. I trusted you with everything, Kara. My life, my work, my sacrifices. And what did you do? You mocked me. You stole from me. You tried to erase me. You thought I was too weak to notice, too weak to fight back. Leonard leaned forward, his tone sharp. Tom, this is unnecessary. Family matters shouldn't be aired like this. I snapped my gaze to him. Family? You've been playing father while I was pushed aside. You let her worship you while she discarded me. Well, tonight that stops. You're not her father. I am, and you'll never replace me. Eric shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing the ground beneath him was crumbling. Kara's face crumpled, but it wasn't sorrow. It was fury. How dare you humiliate me like this? In front of everyone! I leaned forward, my voice dropping, calm but lethal. How dare you humiliate me on Father's Day? How dare you erase me online, siphon my money, and think I wouldn't see? Tonight isn't humiliation, Kara. Tonight is consequences. The words echoed across the table. For a moment, no one moved. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Then, slowly, I slid the final page of the trust across the table, the one that listed her conditions in black and white. "Read it," I said, "and then decide who you want to be, the daughter who admits her wrongs and earns redemption, or the woman who loses everything because she can't face herself." Kara's hands shook as she reached for the paper. Her eyes scanned the lines, her breathing shallow. With every word, her mask cracked further. Jake's small voice broke the tension. "Mom," he whispered, looking at her with confusion, fear. She snapped at him, too harsh. "Quiet, Jake." I felt the room tilt. For the first time, my grandson saw her not as a hero, but as what she had become, and I knew. The tide had turned. The silence shattered as Kara slammed the papers down, her face twisted with rage. She thought tonight was her coronation. Instead, it was her reckoning. And this battle had only just begun. The papers lay between us, heavy as stone. Kara's face was flushed, her breathing ragged. For the first time that night, she looked less like a schemer and more like a child caught doing something she couldn't undo. "Dad?" Her voice cracked, softer now, stripped of the confidence that had carried her through every insult, every betrayal. "I didn't mean it. I didn't mean any of it." She looked down, tears sliding past her mascara, staining the glossy pages of the trust. "I was joking. The ticket, the cruise, it was just a joke. You know I love you." The words were fragile, uncertain, but they struck me like a hammer. For a heartbeat, I saw her as she used to be. The little girl who would run to me after scraping her knee, sobbing until I scooped her up and promised the world was still safe. The girl who sat on my shoulders at the county fair, pointing at the Ferris wheel, squealing with joy. And I faltered. I felt my chest tighten, not with anger this time, but with grief. Grief for what was lost, for what might never return. Part of me wanted to believe her, to let those words erase the cruelty of the past years. "Kara," I whispered, my throat raw. "Why? Why did you treat me like that? Why erase me from your life?" She lifted her eyes, wet and glistening, and for a second, just a second, I thought I saw regret. But then she spoke. "Because—" Her lips trembled, but her voice hardened. "Because Leonard is the father I wished I'd had." The room went cold. The air left my lungs as if she had struck me across the chest. Leonard sat up straighter, pleased, while Eric avoided my gaze. Jake froze, staring at his mother in disbelief. And me? Something inside me cracked clean through. For weeks, months, maybe years, I had wondered if I was imagining it, if I was exaggerating the distance, misinterpreting the slights, seeing ghosts where there were none. But now the words were out, naked and brutal. She didn't just prefer Leonard's wealth. She preferred him as a father. I closed my eyes, just for a moment, and saw her at 6 years old, her tiny hand gripping mine at her mother's funeral, whispering, "Don't leave me too, Daddy." And now, decades later, she had left me first. I straightened in my chair, the weakness gone from my voice. "Then that's your truth, Kara, and here's mine. Leonard may have his cruises, his cufflinks, his stories, but he'll never have my blood. He'll never have the years I bled for you, the sacrifices I made. And he sure as hell won't have the legacy I built. That's mine. And now it belongs to Jake." Her tears didn't stop, but I couldn't tell anymore if they were for me or for the fortune slipping through her fingers. For one fleeting second, I mourned the daughter I thought I had. Then I buried that illusion, because the woman sitting across from me wasn't her. I reached out, gathering the trust documents back into the envelope. My hand didn't tremble this time. "You made your choice a long time ago, Kara," I said, "and tonight I'm making mine." Her sobs filled the silence, but I felt no victory, only clarity. She thought her confession would weaken me. Instead, it carved the final line between us. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to let her live with it. The silence after my words was thick enough to choke on. Kara sat there, shoulders shaking, mascara smudged, clutching at the empty air like she could grab hold of the past and drag it back. Leonard broke the silence first, but his voice had changed. Gone was the smug certainty, the paternal pride he wore like a crown. Instead, his tone was clipped, impatient. "Well," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, "if that's how things stand, then this arrangement doesn't concern us, does it?" Kara's head jerked up, confusion flashing across her face. "What? Of course it does. You're family. You'll help me fight this, won't you?" Leonard's smile was thin, brittle. "Kara, you know how optics matter. Associating with you after all this? Well, it doesn't reflect well. My reputation, our family's reputation, comes first." Eric shifted uncomfortably beside him, glancing between his wife and his father. His lips parted, but no words came out. For once, Eric didn't look smug. He looked small. "Dad?" Kara's voice cracked, the word raw, stripped of its usual bravado. "You can't mean that. You've always said—" "I've always said a lot of things." Leonard cut her off, rising to his feet. "But business is business, and attaching ourselves to scandal is bad business. Scandal, that's what he called it, not betrayal. Not cruelty, just bad optics." Kara reached for his arm, desperation flooding her features. "Please don't leave me, not after everything. You said you were the father I deserved." Leonard pulled his arm back, his expression cold. "I never said that. You did." Her face crumpled. I sat in my chair, watching the empire she'd built, her curated Instagram life, her fantasy of belonging to Leonard's world, crumble in real time. The people she had elevated above me, the real family she'd worshipped, were abandoning her the moment she stopped being profitable. Eric finally spoke, his voice low. "Kara, maybe we should step back. Let things cool down." She turned on him, fury overtaking her grief. "Step back? You're my husband. You're supposed to be on my side." But Eric didn't meet her eyes. He stared at the table, ashamed, while his father walked away without so much as a backward glance. The waiter appeared awkwardly at the edge of the room, unsure whether to clear plates or flee. The atmosphere was heavy, suffocating. Kara sank into her chair, trembling. The binder of real estate brochures lay forgotten beside her, its glossy pages now absurd in their emptiness. All the castles she'd built in her mind were made of sand, and the tide had just come in. I felt no triumph, no smugness, just a grim sword of justice. This wasn't me destroying her world. This was her world devouring itself, because it had never been built on love, only on image, greed, and illusion. Jake shifted beside me, his small hand slipping into mine. His eyes were wide, uncertain, but there was no mistaking the way he leaned toward me, not his mother. Kara saw it too, and that, I think, broke her more than Leonard's coldness or Eric's silence. Her son choosing me in that moment, instinctively, shattered what little armor she had left. She looked at me, eyes red, voice barely a whisper. "I'll text you cruise tips," she chirped. "To me, scratch the ticket, Dad, you never know." "Right," I said. In the parking lot, the evening dipped from gold to nickel. Families streamed past, balloons bobbing, fathers carrying paper crowns. I sat behind the wheel and placed the ticket on my knee. The numbers were all promise and no certainty. I nearly folded it in half, and then something caught my eye. Barely there, a glint under the fluorescent spill from the restaurant's sign, a pattern in the ink I hadn't noticed at the table. I leaned closer. My breath fogged the windshield. For a moment, I saw 3 matching symbols lined like soldiers. It could have been a reflection. It could have been a trick of light, or it could have been the first breath of a storm. I turned the key, the engine catching like it always had. Faithful, patient. I didn't drive home, not yet. "Dad, please." I held her gaze, steady. "Actions have consequences, Kara, and this is yours." As Leonard walked out and Eric hung his head, Kara's empire of borrowed love crumbled around her. And in that rubble, she finally saw the truth. The family she'd chosen had never truly chosen her back. The restaurant had emptied out around us, plates cleared, candles burned low. Leonard was gone, Eric silent, Jake clinging to my side. All that remained was Kara, shattered, mascara streaked, her carefully constructed facade lying in ruins. She pushed the trust papers toward me with trembling hands. Her voice broke. "Dad, I was wrong. Please, I'll apologize. I'll do the volunteering. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't cut me out." The sound of her calling me dad like that, raw, desperate, pierced me deeper than her insults ever had. For a second, I saw not the woman who humiliated me at Father's Day, but the little girl who once cried when her balloon floated away, begging me to get it back. Her voice cracked again. You don't understand. I didn't mean it. The cruise, the ticket, all of it. It was stupid. A joke gone too far. Please believe me. I leaned forward slowly, studying her face. For the first time all night, there was no smirk, no manipulation, no smug certainty. Just a broken woman who realized the game was over. But then I remembered her words. Leonard is the father I wished I'd had. They echoed like thunder in my skull. Kara, I said softly, you didn't just mock me, you replaced me. You told the world I was nothing. You told my grandson that I wasn't his grandfather. And you did it willingly, proudly, for years. That wasn't a joke. That was the truth you wanted. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She reached across the table, grasping for my hands, but I pulled them back. Please, she whispered. I'll change. I'll be better. I'll show you. I can't lose you, Dad. Her voice rose, cracking under the weight of panic. I can't lose the money. I can't lose everything. Don't do this to me. And there it was, the slip. The truth tangled in her desperation. She couldn't tell the difference between losing me and losing the fortune. My chest tightened, not with pity, but with finality. You already lost me, Kara, I said quietly. You lost me the day you decided another man was worth more than your own father. And now, you've lost the fortune too, because you showed me what you valued, and it wasn't family. She sobbed harder, her shoulders shaking violently. The sound was raw, guttural, animal. The kind of sob that comes when the last mask is ripped away and there's nothing left to hide behind. Jake shifted uncomfortably, his small hand squeezing mine tighter. His eyes darted between us, wide with confusion and sadness, but also with understanding. Even at his age, he could see it. His mother wasn't begging for forgiveness. She was begging for survival. Kara fell to her knees beside the table, clutching at the hem of my jacket like a child terrified of being abandoned. Her voice was hoarse, broken. Dad, I'm your daughter. You can't do this. Blood is blood. You can't throw me away. I looked down at her, my voice steady, my decision sealed. Family comes first, Kara, always. But you chose to walk away from me long before I chose to walk away from you. Tonight, you're living with that choice. Her sobs filled the silence. Around us, the staff looked away, pretending not to see the collapse of a family. For the first time in decades, I felt like I wasn't the one begging. I wasn't the one clinging. I was the one standing tall, steady, unshaken. Kara knelt at my feet, her voice shredded to a whisper. Please, Dad, don't leave me with nothing. And as her words dissolved into sobs, I realized she wasn't just talking about money. She was talking about me. And that, more than anything, proved it was already too late. 6 months. That's how long it had been since that dinner. 6 months since Kara knelt at my feet, begging for forgiveness she hadn't earned. 6 months since Leonard turned his back, Eric hid in silence, and Jake clung to me like a lifeline. A lot can change in 6 months. The Thomas Martinez Legacy Trust was fully operational now. Marcus had filed every piece of paperwork. Sarah had tracked every cent, and the money was no longer just numbers in a lottery account. It was action, movement, life. Jake was thriving. His college fund was ironclad, his future secured. He still came by on weekends, sometimes with his textbooks, sometimes just to sit with me by the lake. We didn't need many words between us. He was old enough to see the truth for himself, and smart enough to value it. The scholarships had already begun. I attended the first awards ceremony, watching kids from broken homes walk across the stage, clutching envelopes that meant they could dream bigger than I ever could at their age. Their eyes shone with gratitude and possibility. And for the first time in decades, I felt the weight of my sacrifices transforming into something beyond just survival. As for Kara, she had started the volunteering, not because she wanted to, but because it was the only path left to her. Marcus had made it clear, no service, no inheritance. 200 hours in a local elder care facility. I heard stories. At first she was bitter, snapping at the nurses, dragging her feet through the motions. But over time, something shifted. An old woman she cared for pressed a photograph of her own estranged daughter into Kara's hand, whispering, "Don't waste the years the way I did." I don't know if it pierced through, but I like to think it did. Her social media was quieter now. No more glossy photos with Leonard. No more captions about real father figures. In fact, Leonard had gone silent too, his name dragged through whispers of opportunist after abandoning her so publicly. Eric followed his father's lead, as always. Kara, stripped of her stage, had no one left to perform for. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if she could change. If the hours spent bathing the forgotten, feeding the frail, holding the hands of the dying might carve out a new piece of her heart. But then, I'd remember the look in her eyes that night. Not just desperation, but entitlement. The kind that doesn't vanish in months. It takes years, maybe lifetimes. I wasn't naive anymore. I didn't wait for apologies that rang hollow. I didn't hold my breath for her to call me dad with the kind of love that little girl once had. If redemption came, it would be hers to earn, not mine to grant. My life, though? My life had found peace. I'd bought a modest home near the lake, a place where the mornings were quiet and the evenings painted the water in fire and gold. My tools hung neatly in the shed, not because I needed to fix engines anymore, but because sometimes the sound of a wrench in my hand reminded me of who I was before betrayal tried to erase me. I wasn't erased. I wasn't forgotten. Not anymore. One night, as the sun dipped low and Jake sat beside me on the porch, he turned to me and asked, "Grandpa, do you think Mom will ever change?" I looked out at the lake, the water reflecting the dying light. "I don't know, Jake," I answered honestly. "But I know this. People can change when they're ready. The question is whether she wants to." He nodded quietly, leaning his head on my shoulder. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not for Kara. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But for Jake. For the kids receiving scholarships. For myself. Hope that the legacy I left wasn't bitterness, but justice. Justice was done. My sacrifices had finally built something lasting. But as the waves lapped gently against the shore, one question lingered in the quiet night. Would Kara ever find her way back? Or had she walked too far into the dark? It started with a joke, a $2 ticket tossed across a table, meant to remind me of my place, small, pitiful, expendable. But life has a strange sense of humor. The very joke meant to mock me became the hammer that shattered the chains I had carried for years. Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I still replay that Father's Day dinner in my mind. The laughter, the smirk, the way Kara's voice dripped with disdain. I used to wonder if I could have stopped it sooner, if I could have been louder, stronger, less willing to let things slide. But regret is a dead weight, and I've learned not to carry it anymore. That ticket wasn't just luck, it was a message. Maybe from fate, maybe from God, maybe from the universe itself, reminding me that even the smallest scrap of paper can hold the power to change everything. I look at my hands sometimes, scarred, cracked, oil-stained from a lifetime of labor. Hands that held wrenches, cradled my daughter as a baby, worked double shifts so she could chase dreams she never thanked me for. For years, I thought these hands only built for others, but now I see they built something else too. Endurance, patience, resolve. The money didn't make me powerful. It only revealed the truth that was always there. That kindness has limits. That silence has a breaking point. That a father's love, once betrayed, can become something harder, sharper, unyielding. And yet, I don't hate her. Strange, isn't it? You'd think after everything, the mockery, the theft, the erasure, I'd want revenge to burn her to ash. But revenge without justice is just another form of cruelty. What I wanted was balance. I drove to the 24-hour pharmacy at the corner, where bad news goes to hide and good news pretends to be ordinary. I parked under the brightest lamp, pulled a quarter from the ashtray, and hovered it over the first silver square. I told myself it was just a game for children and optimists. And then I pressed the metal down. I'm Tom, 63 years old, a retired mechanic who's spent his life with grease under his nails and exhaustion in his bones. My story doesn't begin with betrayal. It begins with sacrifice. For 35 years, I worked double shifts at the garage. I missed birthdays, vacations, and even my own anniversaries just to make sure my daughter Kara had everything she needed. Every bolt I turned, every transmission I rebuilt, I told myself it was for her future. When Kara was little, she used to climb into my lap, smelling like crayons and peanut butter, her her tiny arms wrapped around my neck, to show her that choices matter, that words matter. That family isn't something you replace when it no longer shines. Will she change? I don't know. That's her road to walk, not mine to pave. But I've given her a mirror she can't turn away from, and the choice to step back into the light if she dares. As for me, I found peace in Jake's laughter, in the quiet mornings by the lake, in the knowledge that scholarships with my name will outlive me, touching lives I'll never meet. For the first time in decades, my sacrifices don't feel wasted. They feel planted, like seeds that will grow into something stronger than I ever was. Kara thought that $2 ticket was proof of my worthlessness, but the truth? That ticket wasn't about worth. It was about revelation. It revealed her greed. It revealed Leonard's cowardice. It revealed Eric's silence. But most of all, it revealed me. The man I had almost forgotten I was. A father. A fighter. A legacy that cannot be erased. So, if you ever find yourself on the receiving end of laughter, humiliation, or betrayal, remember this. Sometimes the smallest thing, the thing meant to break you, can become the very weapon that saves you. That ticket wasn't just paper. It was justice. And justice once claimed can never be taken away. The night I scratched that ticket, I thought it was luck. But as I sit here now watching the sun paint the lake gold, I know better. It wasn't luck. It was a reckoning. And reckoning, once it begins, has a way of finding everyone in the end. Back then, I believed the love between a father and daughter was unshakable. I never imagined those same arms would one day shove me to the margins of my own family. I lived modestly, still do. A one-bedroom apartment above Main Street, the kind of place that rattles when trucks pass by. No fancy vacations, no golf memberships, no second homes by the water. Every spare dollar went to Kara. Her braces, her textbooks, her tuition at a college I could barely afford. I used to eat ramen 3 nights a week so she could have new shoes for prom. That was the deal I made with life. I'd settle for less so she could reach for more. And then there was Eric's father. If I was the man of grit and sweat, he was the man of silk and polish, always arriving at family gatherings in tailored suits, carrying himself like the room was already his. He'd lean back in the best chair, swirling expensive scotch, his words dripping with the confidence of a man who never had to worry about the rent being late. People gravitated toward him, Kara included. I saw the change slowly. She used to brag about my work ethic, how her dad could fix anything. But as the years passed, she began to shrink my place in her story. At Christmas, she'd rush to seat Eric's dad at the head of the table, leaving me fumbling with folding chairs at the side. At Easter, she introduced me to her friends as just my dad, while she praised Eric's father as like a second father to me. I can't describe the way those words burned. It was as if I was being erased, one polite laugh at a time. Even my own birthday was swallowed in the shadow of Eric's father. The year Kara forgot my day altogether, she still managed to organize a surprise party for him, complete with a cake that cost more than my month's groceries.